we'll get going. So to everybody who is joining us, thank you so much for joining us for this very special online event with Kaneana May and Alli Sinclair joining us from far and away. Ellie in Geelong and Kaneana up on the mid-north coast, did you say, Kaneana, of New South Wales? We can't hear you now. Are you on mute?
Oh,
We've lost you, Kaneana. All right. I'll push along with my introduction, and Kaneana can catch up. So I'd like to start tonight by acknowledging that I am broadcasting from beautiful traditional lands of the Gunditjmara people. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, and past and present, and their emerging leaders, and acknowledge the deep connection that Aboriginal people had and still have with Gunditjmara country that we are broadcasting from tonight. Kaneana is here tonight talking about her newest novel, All We Have Is Now. And Kaneana, can we hear you now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Brilliant. So welcome. She studied television production at university and graduating with first class honours in screenwriting. She went on to work in television, including roles as a script assistant on All Saints, which was one of my favourite shows at the time, a storyliner on Headland, and a scriptwriter on Home and Away. Since becoming a mother, she's turned her attention to fiction writing. For the better for us. Writing, boot camp, coffee, chocolate and champagne are just some of Kaneana's favourite things. And Alli is here celebrating her newest novel called The Codebreakers. Alli is an adventurer at heart and has won multiple awards for her writing. She's lived in lots of different places, including Argentina, Peru and Canada, and has climbed some of the world's highest mountains. Worked as a tour guide in South and Central America and has travelled the globe. Not at the moment, though, I'm guessing, Alli. No. She enjoys immersing herself in exotic destinations, cultures and languages, but Australia has always been close to Alli's heart. So, Kaneana, we might start with you, and I have got your books here. So your newest book, and I'm just going to hold it back so you can see it. All We Have Is Now is your newest novel. Can you tell us a little bit about the story and what inspired you to write that one?
Yes, thank you, Tanya. Thanks for having us on tonight. Alli and I have done one of these before, and it's lots of fun doing it with another author. So All We Have Is Now, yes, is my second book, and it is about three women who run a wellness centre together. So we've got a nutritionist, a counsellor, and a nutritionist. It's been a little while since I've talked about it, but they run a place, a home, is like a federation house, which they welcome locals into their. Sorry, I'm hearing myself back now. My audio is just not doing it tonight. So they offer health and well-being and recovery and peace, a really nice place to go and kind of get yourself balanced, and they just want to help people, and they've come together. They've been friends for about 5 years, but they don't know everything about each other, and the first it opens up with them looking at a new location for their business because they've been expanding, and they find the perfect place, only that they've got one too many rooms, and financially they're going to have to get someone else in. And so the person that walks into their story or into their world is Tom, who is a secret from Olive's past. No one knows what he's hiding, and Olive's scared that everything that she's been, building her life upon is all going to come falling to pieces. So the inspiration of why I wanted to write something like that was basically, I think the first gut instinct to do something about a wellness centre was that I was craving that as a writer. My debut, which was The One, and that was its original cover, it was about reality television and behind the scenes of TV, and at times it could be a bit spotlighty and catty, and that fast-paced. I think I was craving to go into a world which was a little bit calmer and kinder and gentle, and I wanted to explore all those different things. So I think that's what originally kick-started the idea. At the time that I started writing it, I was my youngest was at preschool, which was half an hour away, but it would be an hour round trip. So I used to go to my local library, which is Mid Coast Libraries, and I would do some research there. So I was looking through lots of wellness magazines and for story inspiration, and I think it all just kind of blossomed from there.
Yeah, wonderful. And Ellie, your newest novel, and I'll just grab it, is called The Codebreakers. Let's hold it back so you can see. Sorry, with my background.
Okay.
Obviously a novel at the backgrounds, a novice at the backgrounds. Can you tell us a little bit about that one and what inspired you to write it? Because a little bit of a different setting to Kaneana's.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, different setting, different era. It probably couldn't be two different books there.
That's right.
So the Codebreakers is inspired by the real life female codebreakers in Brisbane in World War II. I imagine most people probably heard about Bletchley Park in the UK. So sorry, I'm just thinking. Why I start talking the dog barks. Sorry.
It's okay. I've got a dog here too, and I'm so worried she's going to start barking.
It'll be some bird that dares to be in our front yard. So Central Bureau is the organisation in Brisbane, and it's located in a leafy suburb, Ascot. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Brisbane, but it's a beautiful old neighbourhood, gorgeous trees and whatnot. So the men work in a mansion, and the women work in the garage at the back of the property, and they call themselves the Garage Girls. So they totally own it. And their job is to encode and decode messages that go to places like Bletchley Park, or in the USA there was Arlington Hall. Also communications between all the allied outposts all over the world. Part of their job was also working with Japanese Morse code that had been intercepted, and making sure that those messages went off into all the right places. So the inspiration came from a Google search. So I know, crazy. So I had written a book in 2018 called Burning Fields, and it was set in post-war Queensland. And my main character worked for the Australian Women's Army Service in Brisbane. And I really liked the idea of actually visiting a story set during World War II and exploring the kind of jobs that the women did back then, because obviously there was a shortage of men. A lot of them were overseas, so women actually had a chance to do all kinds of different roles. So I just did Women, World War II, Brisbane. This really, really tiny article popped up about a woman who worked in Brisbane for Central Bureau, and she was a codebreaker. I didn't even know we had codebreakers here. So the researcher in me went, okay, I need to know more. So it was probably 2 years of pretty solid research, and I managed to track down the real female codebreakers. So hearing their stories, being able to ask lots of different questions, about what it was like to keep a secret for nearly 6 decades because of the kind of nature of their work that they did. They had to sign the Official Secrets Act, so they had to live with, pretty much a double life and not ever tell their family and friends. So being able to talk to them was really helpful in terms of, understanding what it was like, and that was, so their stories kind of helped inspire this particular story, which follows Ellie, who she's our main character, and we kind of go on her journey throughout her lifetime.
Yeah.
And
what an inspiring story it is. Both of these novels I really enjoyed, and they both explore really important issues in relation to women that are not always talked about. Can you tell us a little more, without any spoilers, can you tell us a little bit more about including those sort of themes and stories in your novels, and why you think it's so important to tell these stories that aren't always talked about?
You can go first, Kaneana.
Thank you. Well, I think most of there's a few big issues within my book. One of them that is pretty obvious from the get-go is this Alzheimer's storyline, and that is not a spoiler, but it's something that my grandmother, when I was only about 7 or 8, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and so I think it had been coming on for quite a long time, that they had all noticed, but as a child I probably wasn't privy to any of that. But so she went from walking around and then was hospitalised the next day, and then spent the next 5 years in a nursing home. And so most of my memories are of her in a nursing home, and I think that's just something that has always kind of really stayed with me. And I do remember the impact that it had on especially my mum, but all of her siblings and my grandfather. So I think that was something that I wanted to explore as well, how it impacts, and her as well, but how it impacts everyone's relationships and the challenges they face with that. There's other elements within my story that are pretty big issues, but they aren't really talked about, and I just don't want to give it away as a spoiler. However, the inspiration for that was that I had several close friends over a period of about 5 years go through really heartbreaking experiences. Each of them were a little bit different. Everyone dealt with it completely differently. I always felt quite helpless and didn't, wanted to say the right thing, wasn't sure what the right thing was, and maybe the right thing for one person isn't the right thing for another. So I just really wanted to explore that and honour what they had been through in the experience. And I hope that when people are reading the book, it kind of allows a dialogue to open up about it, and for it to be a topic that isn't so taboo. And I'm really sorry that I'm speaking without addressing the issue.
That's fine. Yeah,
entirely.
Completely,
but yeah,
appreciated that.
One of the things I really wanted to explore with All We Have Is Now is friendship, and how friendship can get you through hard times and dark times, and how friendship isn't always necessarily easy. Sometimes you're a little bit clueless. You don't know how to support certain friends. Sometimes your friends aren't doing what you want them to do or expect them to do. And I felt like I place a lot of value in friendship and want to be a great friend to my friends. And after I wrote the one, even though I had 3 female characters, they weren't in a friendship relationship. So friendship wasn't something I really explored in the one. They had their separate storylines that over interacted, but not like true friends. And I think that that's really something special, especially within a workplace. So a workplace can allow great friendship, but you can also put up different barriers. You can tell them what you want to tell them or what you don't want to tell them. So I just wanted to have a play around with that, and I had a really great time exploring all the issues. And you spend all this time with these women that you've made up, but you feel like they're real, which is just such a surreal experience. And to have people read about them and feel that they're real too is, such an honour.
Yeah, I definitely, that friendship line, definitely related to a lot of that. Very relatable in as far as, like you say, working with your work friends. You often have different relationships with work friends as opposed to your very close long-term friends. But they're still as important to you in your life every day. So
especially when you spend so many hours of each of your days with them. Some people would spend more time with their work colleagues and friends than they would with family members. So it's just
for sure. And Alli, there's a lot of really important issues in your novel, and you've touched on some of them when you've talked about the inspiration, but just tell us why that's so important to you to share these stories.
Well, actually, friendship, funnily enough, is another thing. We'll lead in with that one. I think anyone who's had an intense experience, whether it's traveling or work, or where you're with a group of people for a certain amount of time or a specific event, that the friendships can become really intense. and also very important in your life. So I wanted to explore friendship between the women who worked for Central Bureau, because they lived and worked with each other. They actually lived in an army barracks in Chermside, and then they worked in Ascot. And the kind of friendships that they had, they were really only could rely on each other, because they knew what everyone was doing. So, you know, they knew the kind of secrets that they had to hold on to. They knew the pressure of, you know, keeping that part of yourself from family and friends. And so they really supported each other quite a lot during the war. But then after the war, they all went their separate ways. And it was really interesting, like, to see how the friendships pretty much disintegrated, because a lot of the women couldn't cope with keeping secrets. And so even though these friendships were really dear to them, they found it really difficult to maintain them. And then we sort of, over the years, find out what happens, you know, when they see each other. But I also wanted to explore women working non-traditional roles during the war. Our main character, Ellie, she starts out working as an engineer for Qantas. Her passion has always been planes, but because she was a female, never had the opportunity. Her dad was a pilot with Qantas in rural Queensland. So it was a passion, but she didn't get that chance until World War II. And she's really conflicted, because she's finally getting to live out her dream by working with planes. But then the reason why she's working with planes is because the world's, you know, in the middle of another war. So she kind of battles with that quite a bit. And then after the war, you know, I mean, these women, you know, dealt with some of the biggest secrets that Australia's ever seen. And then they're expected to go back to the kitchen. And, yeah.
I couldn't even imagine.
No, exactly. I mean, here they are, they're holding their own with the men, you know, they're privy to some of the biggest secrets out there. And then the war's over, and then it's like, okay, see you girls, you know, go have family. Off you go. So my character's quite ambitious, so she struggles a lot with that, and ends up paving her own way. And I used a lot of really great Australian women as inspiration for my main character, you know, women who have paved their way in the aeronautical field, and, you know, lots of different areas. So it was really nice to actually be able to, I guess, you know, use real life stories as inspiration behind my character, and give readers a chance to learn about, you know, some really amazing women who, you know, we've never heard of before.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, as I've mentioned, I love the strengths of your female characters in both of your novels. They're really, really strong, and often following their own paths, but relying on each other for friendship as well. So, did you have an affinity with any particular character in your novel, and why was that? And Kaneana, that might be asking you to choose a favourite out of 3 characters there, which is probably nearly as bad as choosing your favourite child, I imagine.
I've got 3 children actually, and I told them
there you go.
They're all the favourite when they do the right thing.
Exactly.
I like that.
As I said, they're all they feel like they're all your really good friends, but I think I did have a bit more of an affinity with Olive.
Yeah.
But that's also, I think it's linked to, I wrote a short story a couple of years prior to writing All We Have Is Now, and it was published in the Underdog short story anthology. So that this book it's 12 short stories for young adults, and none of us at the time had been published. So this was my first publishing excitement. So that was a huge deal. And the story is involving Olive. So somewhere along the way, I decided when I was creating All We Have Is Now that the character of Olive, who is very particular about things, like likes to be in control and likes to be everything to be ordered, is kind of quite judgmental. She wants to be helpful all the time, but she's also quite secretive. I just felt like I really knew exactly who she was. She's also craving to be liked and craving to be someone that she's not that she isn't, but she just can't. It's like she can see how other people are really likable, but she can't let herself be more free. Or so there's a few moments within the book that she keeps watching how easygoing Bree is, who's the Pilates instructor, and she thinks that she would like to be like that, but she's someone that when she's really stressed, she just cleans every surface, and she tidies everything and does accounting for fun. But I could just really get into her headspace. She's a really good businesswoman, and she is definitely successful, but something happened in her life. So this is what I imagined is her backup career. This isn't what she was going to set out to do all along, but that kind of comes clear within the pages of the book. So even though I wouldn't say I have a favourite, I felt like I knew her really well. I knew her voice, and a way that I've described it before was that there's a line in there about her not wanting to wear her slippers outside, and my sister sent me a message and said, "Is Olive based on me? Because she's a little bit like this." And I said, "No, she's not." She goes, "I hate wearing my slippers outside." And I said, "Oh, I don't wear my slippers outside either." And I think it's a really great way to think about it, because then I thought about, well, Bree would probably wear her Ugg boots, which I have said before, through like wet grass. Yeah. Whilst Elsie probably doesn't even own slippers. She probably is someone that pulls socks on. So it's just I think just getting into their different headspaces and knowing who they are and how they move and what they like and what they don't like. But I definitely always instinctively, I think I've said that.
I know what you're trying to say.
Instinctively, knew what Olive was going to do. Yeah.
It's interesting how much, to me, who's not a writer, how much detail you think about the characters when you're talking about them in that way to Kaneana.
Yeah. I know, because they're real up here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alli, who's your favourite? Do we have to ask, or?
Mrs. Hanley. I love Mrs. Hanley. Mrs. Hanley was not. I didn't expect. She was going to be not even a secondary character, like a thirdly or fourthly character. I know there's no such word as that, but anyway. So Mrs. Hanley owns the boarding house that Ellie stays in, and Mrs. Hanley, until she goes to the barracks and is recruited, but Mrs. Hanley features throughout the book, and she came fully formed. Mrs. Hanley is, I guess she's the glue for a lot of the characters in the story. She has a thing where she will take in strays on a Sunday. So she has her Sunday roast, and she makes it a point of meeting a young soldier and inviting him in for a home cooked meal. And so part of I interviewed so many people, not just people from Central Bureau, but so I remember someone, I think it was a gentleman at the MacArthur Museum in Brisbane, and he was telling me about how his mum used to do that during the war. And I thought, I love that. And it just made sense for Mrs. Hanley to do that. Yeah. Mrs. Hanley also baked sympathy scones. So, if there was a neighbour who lost a husband in the war, then what she would do is she'd, take the kid in and while the mum was, sort of trying to figure out what to do next and get over the shock of the news, she'd get the kids in and then make scones and then take them around to the neighbourhood and those sorts of things. And so Mrs. Hanley is really definitely the glue for a lot of the characters. She's lost her own sons in the war. She lost her husband as well, just as World War II broke out. And so she's had a lot of loss in her life, but she still has so much to give. And it's that giving that actually keeps her going. It gives her a sense of purpose, and it makes her feel like she can, put some love out in the world that she's lost, So Mrs. Hanley definitely surprised me that she got as much airtime as she did, but she deserved it because everyone needs a Mrs. Hanley in their life.
I definitely agree with that. And it's funny you say that, Ellie, because Mrs. Hanley, as soon as she appeared in the novel and she was in her kitchen baking, I could picture her instantly in my head, or have a picture in my head instantly of what she might have looked like, what she might have been wearing, and even to the smell of the kitchen.
Oh, that's great.
Because I'm a cook myself. I love baking and cooking, so I could kind of put myself there. So yeah, I think she's probably one of my favourite characters in your book as well.
Ah, good.
There you go. So for both of you, can you give us an insight into setting your base for your novels? Like, do you always have a particular setting in mind when you write, or does it sort of come to you as you're going through the process of planning for a new novel?
You should start that one, Allie. You've written way more books than me.
Oh gosh. I guess by my bio, I'm definitely I'm a traveller at heart. So my first 3 books, I'll get them right: Luna Tango, Under the Spanish Stars, and Beneath the Parisian Skies. I'm going to forget.
That what happens? You forget the titles when you've written that many.
I know. Sometimes I look at my characters. It's terrible. It was like you saying,
Just like this up.
You write, yeah, you write it and then you move on. So don't tell my characters, I forget them. So they're what I call my armchair fiction stories. So they're set in Argentina, Spain, and France, yeah, I mean, I love writing. I love writing stories set in different destinations. And yeah, fine, I just can't help myself. That's just the nomad in me. But I guess in the Codebreakers was a little bit different because obviously I had to set it in the city that actually happened in. But the next 2 are definitely destination type novels as well. So
that's good.
Yeah, I
guess to have some variety.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, if we can't actually jump on a plane right now, I'll just do it on the pages.
Yeah. I like that philosophy. What about you, Kaneana? Do you always have a setting in mind when you write your novels or think about writing?
Well, my setting for the one was very TV based, and with my background in TV, I felt like it was a world that I knew. The TV set, so to speak, and what happens on location. So that was the basis for it. However, I'm definitely not as game as Allie, but I haven't travelled as I did a around the world trip for a year, but then other than that, haven't really ventured to a place that I feel confident enough to write explicitly about. So my locations so far are pretty much an hour from my hometown. In the one, I go up to Port Macquarie, which is an hour north. I go into Gloucester, which is an hour inland. And then all we have is now I went to Wingham, which is about half an hour from where I live. So all locals love the local references. They really appreciate the little place, like the name drops of different cafes or the hospital or different landmarks. They all really appreciate that. But I think it's more to do with my confidence level of, well, I know that place. Wingham's a really beautiful country town, and it embraces alternative, and they're into health and well-being. They've got lots of healthy cafes, and they have a buskers day where everyone's on the street busking, and I felt like Healing Hands, which is my fictional wellness centre, would be a place that you would see in Wingham. So it was a believable location for me. But yes, the manuscript that I've just finished, I did go further afield to Sydney and a few other locations too. So maybe as the years go on, I'll get more adventurous.
Yeah.
Might go out of the state next time. We can't go out of the state.
If we can.
Right now.
Yeah. But you're right, Kaneana. People love it when they read a book and they can recognise the setting that you're in, or if you've used a cafe name that's really similar to the actual cafe. I guess maybe they probably look for themselves in the characters a little bit then as well.
Well, I had a really lovely experience that for my local book launch, 3 local businesses. It was 2 different cafes, one in Wingham and one that's on the beach that they went to. They donated gift vouchers like for lucky draw prizes, and so did they go to a maze, which is a real place too, and they donated a voucher. So it was really lovely that they all the owners got a great thrill out of being in the book and said that they'd love to donate a prize.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, that was a bit of fun.
Yeah, very good. So we've talked a little bit about the research in your book, Ellie, and I'm just wondering what type of research in a bit more detail do you do, either of you, when writing a book? Like how much time is spent into the research behind? There would have been quite a bit in your book, I imagine, Ellie, and even Kaneana, with all the different topics that you cover and some of the different themes. There would have been a fair bit of research in yours as well.
Do you want to go, Ellie? I imagine there's so much for you.
Yeah. Oh, so much. You know, I look, research is my thing. Sometimes I prefer researching over writing. After I wrote The Codebreakers, I remember saying to my editor, it nearly broke me. The next one's not going to require as much research. But lo and behold, guess what? Next story idea is going to require a crazy amount of research. I can't help myself. So, so with The Codebreakers, gosh, it was probably 2 years of pretty solid research in between me writing other books. You know, I consulted with, professors at the University of New South Wales about, the history of signals intelligence, and the ex-head of the Australian Signals Directorate, which is our big, cyber organisation as well, which Central Bureau was kind of like the precursor to that. I, of course, consulted with the people who work for Central Bureau, historians, in Brisbane, like so many. The list is very long. But I absolutely love it. It's, research is a passion of mine. But it's actually really nice to know that all the research that I've done and all the contacts that I've made for this particular book, we're now making a documentary. So... all that research is now actually really helping us develop the documentary, because I've had to dive into a lot of, like the National Archives, Australian War Memorial, so all that research, and we can actually now sort of, put it together in a documentary so people can, can watch it and then read the book and sort of go, okay, I remember that bit.
That's super exciting. Is that going to be out on television or through one of the streaming, or you're not sure yet?
Yeah, well, we've been in talks with a very well-known broadcaster. So we hope to have it ready to go early to mid next year. And then I guess it'll just depend entirely on, how it fits in with their schedule. But I will definitely be shouting it from the rooftops once I can.
Fabulous.
But my director and co-producer are just amazing. They're very experienced in documentaries. So it's also been a big learning curve for me as well, which is great.
Yep. Fantastic. Kaneana, how do you go about researching for your books?
Well, I'm just feel, a bit in awe of Alli and other writers that do historical novels. must be at times very overwhelming to have so much, fabulous stuff to work with, and just know what to pick and what not to pick, and what's too much, what's not enough. I find that enough, and that's with the contemporary novel. So, yeah, as I said earlier, for this book in particular, I spent a lot of time looking through wellness magazines and would read different articles to kind of get in the right headspace and vibe of the place that I wanted to create in the Healing Hands environment itself. But yeah, it's funny, you think you don't necessarily need to research much, but then kind of nearly every storyline or every scene requires something that you don't know about, and then you've got to be finding out more. For a fair few of the subjects, I spent a lot of time in different forums where I would read lots and lots of people's personal experiences and what they would say, and conversations they were having with one another about different emotional levels and different stages of grief and experiences, and what happened when to different people, to kind of try and get what I wanted to happen within my story to work with. I also had a really great beta reader that had been through one of the experiences and gave great feedback on a draft, and then we, would help with different kinds of wordings and tone, and just suggestions to see whether I wanted to take them on board. And a lot of, I guess, just reading different books or Googling. It sounds terrible, but just, I don't know about that.
Google's
so whack it into Google and see what else I can find. And then there's one article that links to something else. And and then just talking to people. I mean, with the Alzheimer storyline, I did talk to my mum a lot about things that I didn't remember as a child that I suddenly learned a lot more about. And then that would often lead to other people who had been through different experiences. But yeah, part of the research I find is often talking to people and seeing how they've reacted, or how friends or family have reacted in that kind of situation, and just taking that on board and seeing how that relates to the character, because I think that's the importance, what would be at their heart and true self. But yeah, it's definitely not on the same level as Alli's research.
No, well, when you are basing a novel on true historical facts, so
you have to get it right.
To do a lot of research to get it right, because somebody reading it will notice if you don't.
Yeah, that is my biggest fear. I've got a really fabulous editor, and we're always cross-checking, triple-checking everything. So which means it's really hard to let go once it's done, because it's just like, oh no, let me just check. And she's like, Ellie, we've checked it 50 times. Just
That's it. So just a quick reminder for people joining us tonight, if you've got questions for Alli and Kaneana at the end of our questions, just pop them in the chat and we'll be happy to ask them for you. So moving along a little bit to what your writing process is like, and I guess we'll mention the topic at the moment, COVID, and it's affected everybody's lives, we know that, but has it affected your writing process, and how was the writing experience for these novels different compared to your previous works, or was it the same?
I'll go first.
Sure.
So my writing experience, so I've got 2 manuscripts that are on my computer that haven't seen the light of day, so to speak, that I wrote before the 2 that I've got published. Okay. So I've been writing for trying to get published for over 10 years. And in that time, I started writing when my son was about 7 months old, and he's now 11. So my writing has kind of adapted. I first wrote when he was sleeping, like having his day naps. And so then that kind of has just evolved ever since then. So each year it's kind of looked a little bit different for me, because I added another 2 children, and so I would try and work when I could, but for many, many times that was pretty impossible to work with 3 little kids. Yeah. And then All We Have Is Now was actually, I'm trying to think last year at what stage it was at when COVID hit. I can't remember, but the bulk of the actual manuscript itself would have been written. And the edits would have been done, which was horrible. Homeschooling last year was horrible. This year it's been horrible. I don't know how anyone enjoys it. This was my year where my youngest went to kindergarten, so this was supposed to be like a run-free, like smick year. And I think I've probably done less riding this year than I have in many years.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's had a massive impact on me. Just that my kids are between the ages of 5 and 11, and it's still, even though they're not little kids, they're still, if they're doing homeschool, it's needing a lot more attention, and just that them being in the house, that like they'll definitely leave me alone more than they did when they were under 5, but they interrupt all the time, and there's so much chatter, and there's sometimes they can't even have a conversation without me having to referee something. So yeah, I'm hoping that life goes back to normal. I've had 2 glorious days, yesterday and today, with them being at school. My husband's a teacher, so he was back at school, and it was raining, and it was just delightful. Like, it was just perfect conditions for being a writer at home. And I have been working in a school myself, and I haven't this week, so I've really relished it.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to your experiences with homeschooling and the interruptions and, just the challenges that it presents to people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Alli, how about you?
Yeah, a bit of a mixture of both, actually. Last year was shocking. So, state the obvious. But I was right in the midst of probably my really big structural edits, sort of when the whole news of COVID started happening. Victoria went into their first lockdown. So I found it really hard to concentrate, and adapt with, the online schooling for the kids. And so, it was really, really tough. I wasn't feeling creative. I was, struggling quite a bit, dealing with the whole world news thing, as most people were. And then I got the book in, and things just kind of started to smooth out. I've got to say, this year's been a lot easier in that regard. My 2 kids are now in high school, though, so a lot easier when you've got a year 7 and a year 9 than younger kids. I feel for you, Kaneana. So it has been a lot smoother. I have actually been probably more productive in the last 18 months than I ever have. I probably put that down to not having to ferry kids around to different sports every single day. Often, I'd be riding in the car while the kids are at swim lessons and those sorts of things. So silver lining, I've actually had a bit more time to then pursue other projects as well. The glory of technology, being so lucky to, be able to do these kinds of events. I was really nervous about launching a book, in the middle of a pandemic, because, normally you get to go and do library events and book signings and all those sorts of things. So that has been a really different experience. And it's been really enjoyable too. I do love the face-to-face events, but the fact that we can do these sorts of things is also really fantastic as well. And I think it's kind of, I don't know, my thoughts are, I think in the future, book launches will probably be a mixture of both in person and online, because I think we've sort of discovered now that you can be anywhere and join in a library event, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you there that we will move to a mixture of both. And one of the only advantages of, probably one of the few advantages of COVID has been
we
can connect with each other online now, for something that was too hard for too long, now we can. And that means that we can talk to each other even though we're in vastly different places. And it gives smaller libraries in rural areas like ours an opportunity to connect with a lot more authors, which is just fabulous for us.
So, great for us too.
Yeah, for sure. So for both of you, what do you think are the most challenging and rewarding aspects of writing for you? Kaneana, do you want to start us off with that one?
Oh, well, one of the most challenging that I have found is is writing with kids, but also writing when you have to write. So, and I guess I've done that for many, many years, but sometimes the the creative juices aren't there, but you've got an hour, you've either got to sit down and write or you just lose that opportunity. So I've had to push through plenty of those over the last decade. But I must say this morning, I was just getting out of the shower and an idea that I couldn't quite grab it before then, and I wasn't planning on doing that creative writing. I had a few other jobs that I was going to do, but it just came to me and I was like, oh my goodness, I can just write it down, not just try and file it for nap time or for when someone's watching a movie or late at night when everyone's gone to bed. So it was just such a great moment to be able to write when I could. But yeah, I think that's been one of the challenging things when a story is not working and you've got to just keep working at it is another challenging part, that you're just not sure what's wrong. And did you say rewarding as well?
And rewarding. Surely the reward is seeing the end product, but what else
I think
get out of it?
Yeah. Well, there's so many rewarding aspects, I think, when you get to type the end or when you get to see the cover, but definitely by far is hearing from readers and, having them write to you and, say that, especially with all we have is now, I've had such lovely feedback from readers who have been through different experiences that they've seen within the book and just wanted to share their own and, tell me how much they've valued what I'd written, and that, it's just such an honour that if people are taking their personal time and choosing to read your book and be swept away in your imagined world with your characters. That's definitely the most rewarding.
Yeah. For you too, Ellie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's an absolute delight, and to hear from readers, it's funny, like sometimes, a reader will send an email and be like, oh, I know you're really busy, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, we always have time to hear from readers, always. And I do the same now because, if I really connect with a book, then I will take the time to then go and write to author. And it's amazing how many times either I've received an email or I've sent an email to someone, to an author, and it's just arrived at just that right moment. Authors generally, we're quite neurotic and we have our ups and downs, and often we doubt ourselves and our books and will I be able to write another one? Those sorts of things. But sometimes you get an email and it just hits you right at the right time, and it just gives you that confidence, like, okay, there's somebody out there who loved my last story. I'll keep going. Yeah. Those sorts of things are absolutely amazing. So definitely, people, don't be afraid to reach out to authors and tell them that you love their stories.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Yeah. Look, authors love it. Yeah. We spend a lot of time behind the computer, so hearing from the outside world is very nice.
Yeah. And it can really make your day. You can just be a bit of a slump and then that picks you right up.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's really nice. Challenging for me is writing the first draft.
Okay.
I find them really hard. It's funny. I think with authors, you kind of sit in one camp or the other. I love edits. I love going back and revising and polishing and adding layers and that kind of stuff. I really, really love and I thrive on. But for me, writing the first draft is just quite a challenge. It is like pulling teeth for me. And I think also, I don't know whether it's because I have so much, like I do a lot of research before I start, and then as I write, I then find there's other areas I need to go off and research. So my first drafts are full of lots of question marks or notes, go and research this, or, check this website out. And, so there's a lot of, they're really scrappy. No one ever sees my first draft. They're terrible. Yeah, and I find dialogue really easy to write. So there'll be a lot of dialogue, and then there might be, just describe Burke Street on a Sunday night or whatever, like,
Yeah.
so stuff I go back and build in later because description takes a lot longer for me to write.
Get down.
And I don't want to break the flow of the story. So that's always a challenge. I always, and the other thing is, my writing friends do know me very well because I'll start complaining about a story that I'm writing and they'll go, okay, so you're at 20,000 words in. And sure enough, I'm 20,000 words in. So apparently when I hit 20,000, 60,000 and 90,000, they're my, this story's terrible. I hate this. Why am I writing this moment?
I love that that's consistent each time you write. And that people know you well enough to know that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And Kaneana, you write for television as well. How does that differ from writing a novel for you? Is it more of a team, right?
Yeah.
Teams for television?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I haven't done that for quite a long time now that I've been living regionally and with children. But yes, it was definitely a collaborative effort and it was lots of fun. You'd sit around to a story table, everyone's tossing different ideas around. It's one idea sparks another idea, which is such a great way to produce story because everyone's bringing their own personal experiences to the table. And, if I say, shell to one person, each of you would be thinking a different thing about a shell. So then if you're tossing those ideas about, it just creates more opportunity for what to plot for your characters. So, and in TV, so on the flip side of that, when you're writing by yourself, there's only yourself to kind of come up with all those different ideas. But in TV, then you've got to, compromise. There's someone that's the boss, the story producer is the boss of what actually happens. So there's obviously a lot of compromising at different points. But when you're the author, you get to decide everything. You get to choose. So that's, it's lovely having the power of doing, your own version of the story. Also in TV, there's lots of production requirements. I worked on Home and Away, so there was different requirements about actors being allowed on only certain number of episodes per week. There was different set. You could only have so many scenes in each set and so many scenes on each location, and all those kinds of things would be taken into account. So so that was something that you would being mindful of when you're plotting the story out. Where is this scene taking place? And you really want it to be an outdoor scene, but you just don't have room for it, so it has to be inside. Or then sometimes it's moved inside because it's been pouring with rain for 3 days and they can't shoot it outside. I also, with TV, you were writing with commercial breaks, and because when I learnt there was commercial breaks, it's not just all streaming like it is these days, and cliffhangers and things like that, which has really influenced the way I write myself. I don't write chronologically. I write these scenes that come to mind and then, flip and flop from back and forth all over the place, which I'm sure is a really silly way to write.
My brother writes the same.
Oh, your daughter writes the same?
No, my brother's an author as well, and he's the same. Yeah, he's got lines and little scenes and paragraphs, and you're not alone.
When you were saying that about the first draft, I was listening to a podcast recently where they were saying that they write about 20 drafts within that first draft, and I'm sure I do that. I write and I go back and I change and I write and I go back, and then I don't know, every time I'm like, no, I'm going to write it in order, and then all of a sudden I have this idea for what that massive scene needs to be, and then I'll go, I better write it so I don't forget it, and and then I'm like, I've got to fill in all the things that happen before we get to this point. But that's how TV does it. They mark out those how I was taught to mark out those big points and fill in later.
Yeah, one of our guests has said that Tim Winton writes that way, so you're in good company.
There you go.
There you go. Well,
isn't it?
Very flattered. Ellie, you've hosted writing workshops and retreats for aspiring authors. Perhaps both of you can touch on what's your best advice for those wanting to make a career out of writing?
Write what you love. Write the story that you would want to read, because all writers are readers, and you're going to spend a long time with your characters and your storyline, so you have to be really connected with them. There'll be days where they'll just drive you crazy and you don't want to be in their company, but generally, write the kind of story that you would love to pick up off the bookshelf, and read lots of books, because that is really the best training. Read a story and then try and figure out what worked for you or what didn't work, because you can learn a lot about stories that don't appeal to you as well. So that's a really important thing to do as well. But read across the board, read widely, go to author events, ask questions. That's always really good. Sorry, Kaneana, I'll let you do some.
Yeah, I know you're taking them all.
I could go on for hours.
No, I agree with you. That's definitely right what you want to read. And I think that's a great point about learning from what you don't necessarily like in books. And I think that I've been in a book club for over 5 years now, and I find that that's been a really constructive way to kind of talk about books, but also take on other points of view, because generally it's odd if everyone agrees on everything within the book, and kind of discussing different things. I think that's kind of always in the back of my mind when writing, different people's reactions to certain things in the story. To get published, I think my biggest advice is to be really stubborn. I know that I was like, I'm not giving up on this. I went to writers' events, writers' festivals, would do all like courses online, and at the New South Wales Writers' Centre and the Australian Writers' Centre, which were both near me at the time when I was first starting out. Network, take chances, put yourself out there.
And writers' organisations, like you mentioned, like with New South Wales, there's Writers Victoria here. Go when you can, face to face. Do networking events face to face. If not, do it online. And you also get newsletters and those sorts of things. And often in those newsletters, you'll see, deals being made and which publishing house acquired what particular kind of book and those sorts of things, because then it'll give you a really good idea as to what's happening in the publishing world. So because it can
There's
be
also
quite
opportunities.
Yes,
contests. And contests. And Alli and I are both members of the Romance Writers of Australia, which I think is possibly where we first met, Alli.
I'm pretty sure it was.
And that's just such a welcoming community of people that's where I did my pitching for the one, and where I got my first deal too. So there's lots of opportunities. Just have to be open and willing to try everything, I think.
And like you said, stubborn. No, it's just because it took me 10 years to get published and 3 manuscripts as well. So I think 10 years. Don't want to put any writers off there. I think 10 years is probably,
it's a hard slog.
It just takes time. And commitment. And I've heard a couple of authors now refer to like the writers associations and the Romance Writers Australia and that sort of thing. So I think that's great advice for people who are looking for opportunities out there.
And writers are a really generous bunch. We like to pay it forward. I've had authors help me along the way, and now I try and help other authors sort of coming up through the ranks. We all started at the same place, and writers, I think, really love to encourage each other and help each other out. So it's a great industry.
Definitely.
So I'm aware we're just starting to get to the end of our time, but that's all right. We'll keep going because everyone, I'm sure, is happy to keep listening. So we will move on to the next question, which is, what would you like your one thing for your audience to take away from the experience of reading your books?
Yeah, I can see you looking at me.
we know each other well.
Mine's probably a sense of hope.
Yeah.
Quite simply, is a sense of hope. I feel that, if they've gone on the emotional journey with my characters, I feel at the end that they, feel that they are rewarded with, a hopeful future.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I'm racking my brains. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Hope's definitely one of them. I guess because my books there's so many facts built into my books. I would like, someone who's finished one of my books to close the book and say, wow, I didn't know that. Whatever it is that they've learned throughout. So whether it's an historical fact or something related to a culture that my characters are involved in or whatever. Yeah, they've learned something new.
Yeah. So what's next on the horizon? I know, Kaneana, you said you've got a couple of manuscripts still sitting there waiting. Are you working on your next novel, both of you?
Those two that I mentioned earlier are ones that I wrote prior. So those ones I don't think will be looked at again. I think they're kind of like the practice, trying to find feet ones. Yeah. But I have written another a book 3, what I hope to be book 3, and it's currently with my publisher. So I'm just waiting to hear, trying to channel patience and hope for the best. Yes, please do.
I've got 2 novels on the go. One's my passion project, and one's my publisher's expecting to see. And I've also got the documentary, and I've been working with a producer trying and looking at bringing the Codebreakers to the screen. So
oh wow.
Yeah, she's based in LA, so every time I wake up in the morning, I'm like checking my emails.
Has she emailed me
yet? Yes, so we're making progress. So lots of balls in the air at the moment, but I'm happy for it to be like that. I like to be busy and like to know there's possibilities of lots of different things out there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess we'll hand it over to the audience and see if there's anything that they would like to ask. I'll read a couple of comments only that have come in the chat so far. Kathy says, Ellie, my favourite genre is World War II books. Thank you so much for writing the Australian Codebreaker story, which I was totally unaware until I read your book. So thank you. So she learned something. And to Kaneana, your characters are so relatable, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. All of them, in one way or another, they're characters that stayed a long time after I finished.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely.
As I said, Andrea said that Tim Winton writes the same way that you do, Kaneana. So I think you're in good company there. Anybody else got any other questions that they'd like to ask either Kaneana or Ellie? And I'll just wait to see if anybody starts typing. Otherwise, it's always that awkward waiting game to see if someone starts typing something in the chat. But I guess while we're waiting, so just a reminder of the books again. Hold it back, Tanya. The Codebreakers is Ellie's book. You could find it online at all good bookstores. I'm sure locally here at our local newsagents or Portland Books and Gift, they would be happy to look into ordering you a copy. We, of course, have it at the library as well. Ellie, I really enjoyed this story, and like so many others, I learnt a lot that I didn't know. I knew about Bletchley Park. I had no idea that it had happened here. And like you say, so many important themes in there about women working during the war and then having to go back, or being expected to go back to their normal life, holding many secrets afterwards.
Thank you.
And Kaneana's All We Have Is Now. Kaneana, I don't want to spoil your novel, give any spoilers, but I really loved that you explored the themes and the issues in this novel. And although I didn't have personal experience, I had friends that had had similar experiences. And I had, like you said earlier, not necessarily known how to talk about it with them or broach that subject at the time. And so I found this really enlightening, and I loved the characters. I felt I could feel a part of their world and imagine the wellness centre that they had, and relate to the friendships and the way things don't always turn out the way you think they will.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. That's lovely.
All right. So there's no more questions there. So I think we'll just say thank you very much for joining us. We've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the chat and really appreciated your time tonight. Like I say, we will put this recording up online for those who've missed out. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, and thanks for attending, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having us. It's been a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.